Good afternoon and welcome to DCR's 2026 License Renewal Webinar Part 2. Today, we're going to go over where to renew, the renewal submission, invoicing and payment, curing deficiencies, final determinations, and general reminders. Where to renew. To renew a record, you need to log into the Excel portal. It's also known as the DCR licensing portal. Look under Activities to locate your DCR record number. For annual license records, those in a -LIC, in the Action column, click on Renew License. For annual license applications or temporary records, those end in a suffix of -ANN or -TMP, in the Action column, click on the action required. On the slide here, you can see two examples. The first slide, or the first line on the slide, is an ANN record, and you can see it has action required. To renew that record, you would click on action required. You can also see below the last line is an LIC record, and it gives you the option to renew license. To create your renewal submission, you're going to first be asked to select the commercial cannabis activity or activities you want to renew for 2026. The approved activities on your record will automatically populate with check marks. If you wish to remove an activity, deselect it. You may deselect activities that are populated with a check mark, but you may not add activities as part of the renewal process. Activities that are deselected expire after 11:59 p.m. on December 31st of 2025. Continued operation of activities from January 1st, 2026 and beyond may result in enforcement against unlicensed commercial cannabis activity. When you verify the activities that you want to renew, press continue. On the slide, we have an image of the selection screen. You can see on the left-hand side is a list of commercial cannabis activities. You can see that there's two check marks. One is next to the cultivation processor, and the other is next to nursery. If you did not want to renew one of those activities, again, you would click on the check mark to deselect it, and then it would be a white box. And once you've confirmed which activities you want to renew, you will click continue. In order to renew an activity, it must have a check mark next to the activity. As part of the renewal submission process, you need to review the information on your record to confirm its accuracy. We recommend that applicants and licensees go into the DCR licensing portal, locate their record, go into activities, click on your DCR record number, and then under record info, which is part of the drop-down menu, select attachments. That will allow you to view any of the documents that are attached to your record. You want to make sure that the documents that are required to renew are either up to date and on the most current version of the form, or you will have to submit an updated version of that document as part of the renewal process. As part of this renewal process, there will be a series of yes/no questions, and how you respond to those yes/no questions will drive the documents that the renewal record asks you to upload at the end of the process. It is your responsibility to make sure that all of the required documents are current on the record, or you've uploaded current versions of those documents in order for your renewal record to be considered timely. As part of the renewal submission process, you want to review your ownership information, confirm the owners, primary personnel, financial interest holders, and all other contacts on the record are up to date. You need to confirm that you have site control. If you've already uploaded a multi-year lease, which is valid through at least December 31st, 2026, you will not be required to provide additional evidence of site control. However, if your lease expires before December 31st of 2026, you will be required to provide additional documentation to ensure that you will have site control for the entire calendar year. You need to confirm whether or not your business premises diagram is current and in compliance with LIC 4024 form. Please make sure you go through the checklist to ensure that your premises diagram is up to date. As part of the compliance inspections, this is one of the most common corrections that our compliance team are finding when they're going out into the field. This gives the business the opportunity to update its premises diagram to comply with the requirements prior to an annual compliance inspection being conducted at your business premises. Here's an example of the yes/no forms. You can see that it's asking you to confirm that you've reviewed your ownership and primary personnel information. If you select yes, you will not be asked to provide additional documents. If you select no, you will need to provide updated documents. Same thing for the confirm your business premises diagram. The next set of information is the indemnification agreement. You need to confirm that the document on your record is current and it's the most recent version of our LIC 4005 form. For our social equity businesses, the social equity individual applicant needs to submit the successor and interest form. Please confirm whether or not the document on the record is current and is in the most recent version of our LIC 4018 form. If it is the most recent version and there are no changes to the social equity individual applicant's successor and interest, you will not need to upload a new form. Again, as you go through the renewal page flows, it will ask you to confirm whether or not the record is current. If you select yes, you will not be asked to upload information. If you select no, you will be given an opportunity to upload the additional documents to make sure that your renewal record is complete. You will have to complete and submit an attestation form. The attestation is the Public Health Building and Operating Permits form. It is our LIC 4025 form. You must complete attestation number 1 and 2 according to the renewal year. It must be signed by at least 51% of the level 1 owners on page 4 of the form. If you have questions about how to submit plans to the Department of Building and Safety, please refer to the INT-4001-form. Our attestation number 1 is the renewal cycle begins September 25th or 2025. You understand that prior to the beginning of September of 2026 that you need to submit plans to Building and Safety for plan check. That is the required process to obtain necessary building permits, which would be required for you to pursue your operating permit. Or if you have already submitted your plans, you have the opportunity to provide your plan information to DCR so it can be added to your record. You have to acknowledge that you will be required to get a public health permit for each of your commercial cannabis activities by September 1st of 2026. And you have to understand and acknowledge that you may be required to pursue other clearances required by Building and Safety or the Health Department prior to September 1st of 2026. Attestation number 2 is asking you to check all boxes and complete. Do you understand that the information you have provided, if it's false, incorrect, or insufficient to meet the required milestones identified in regulation number 5, DCR may deny your renewal of the license or may issue a notice of violation or suspension. You have to acknowledge that after receiving your annual license from DCR, a public health permit from the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health and a certificate of occupancy from the Department of Building and Safety are required before you can request a final inspection from DCR. Once you've requested a final inspection, if you pass the final inspection, then and only then would you be eligible to receive your operating permit. The operating permit would replace your temporary approval to operate. And you have to acknowledge that you understand that you're not eligible for an operating permit until you have passed that final inspection. Towards the end of this presentation, we will do some of the reminders for the updates to regulation number 5, which extended the performance period for businesses to get their operating permit. Originally, businesses were required to have their emblem and public health permit by December 31st of 2024, or they would have been required to shut down in January. In lieu of requiring businesses to shut down, we did work with the mayor and city council to extend the performance period to allow for folks to demonstrate that they were making progress towards getting all of the necessary permits to get their operating permit. Therefore, we will be holding folks accountable as part of the renewal process to make progress towards getting all of the necessary permits to request the final inspection and then meet the requirement to get the operating permit no later than 2031. For additional updates, you're going to want to confirm that the information forms and documents on your record are current and accurate. If they're not, you'll have the opportunity to submit current and accurate forms. For your social equity status, it'll indicate if the record being renewed is associated with a verified social equity individual applicant from either the 2019, 2022, and or 2025 calendar years. For our social equity renewals, we do have different grants. Our 2024 Cannabis Equity Grant, the performance period ends October 31st of 2025. So folks that submit renewals as part of the first renewal process may have access to not only 2024 CEG grant monies, but also 2025 CEG grant monies. For folks that timely submit as part of the initial renewal period, we do have sufficient grant funding to provide full fee waivers to social equity applicants, as long as we verify that you meet the criteria to renew under LAMC code 10420. For general applicants, again, if you select that it's a social equity record, but it's not a social equity record, DCR staff are going to review the accuracy of your selection. And if it's incorrect, it could result in processing delays because ultimately we'll have to assess the fees and then generate the invoice. Here is an image from the renewal process. It's asking you to confirm whether or not the information is up to date. If you select no, you'll have the ability to upload additional documentation. You will identify what additional updates need to be made to the record. When your assigned analyst reviews the renewal record, they'll reach out to you to make sure that we get those updated documents and or forms. And then, of course, are you a verified social equity individual applicant? The yes/no selection. If you select yes, you're put into our pipeline to review for grant waivers. If you select no, you're not automatically put into the pipeline to review for grant waivers. As part of the initial rollout, we will be reviewing each record submitted during the first 2 weeks to make sure that people are utilizing this question properly. If we find that folks don't understand the question or they're not properly responding, we may tweak it on a go forward basis. But we will be doing a record by record review, at least during the first 2 weeks, to make sure that folks are getting into the right pipeline for the renewal process. And we're doing that because If a social equity business pays the renewal fees and they would have been eligible for a waiver, we don't have the ability to refund the renewal fee and then apply the waiver. So we do want to make sure that social equity businesses don't have access to an invoice until we've verified whether or not the record is eligible for any waivers. If they are eligible for waivers, those waivers will be applied against the record. Um, and then your analyst will send a communication letting you know if a waiver has been applied. And then for businesses that are not eligible for a waiver, an invoice will be generated and sent. Any questions from step 2 marked no will require documentation to be submitted as part of step 3 in the renewal process, which is the document upload. Uploading the requested documents is required to continue to step 4. Please thoroughly review each of your documents to ensure all of the information requested is provided, required fields are filled out, and signature requirements are met. We will be reviewing documents on a rolling basis. The code does not require us to provide a cure period, but we intend to provide a 7-day cure period if we find document deficiencies. If you do not address those document deficiencies within that 7-day cure period, it will result in the abandonment of your record or ultimately you being subject to additional late fees depending on when the record gets submitted. Here's an example of the message that the system will give you if you've selected a no. It's going to say an error has occurred. The error is the documents and forms on your record are not all up to date. So to address the error, it's going to require you to upload the following information. So here you can see a list of document types that would be required based on the selections we made on our test record. Here you can see the field, which will give you the ability to upload. You would click on the Add button. You'll get a pop-up window that will ask you to identify the file you want to upload. Once you've uploaded it, it will give you a confirmation that it's been uploaded. You'll have to add the appropriate documents to each of the add fields on the screen in order to navigate to the next page. Here's an example of a test record that only had one yes. As you can see, it's only asking you to provide the evidence of site control and the LIC 4025 form. The LIC 4025 form was a form that was rolled out earlier this year. So your 2025 record would not automatically have that form on hand. So you can see here that, based on the yes, no questions, it will drive what documents the system asks you to upload. It's really important for businesses to carefully review all of their responses documents on the summary page. If changes need to be made, you can click on the edit button next to the relevant section. Read the certification at the bottom of the page, check the box to agree, and then press continue to officially submit your 2026 renewal application. You can see here that we have a screenshot from the summary page. On the left-hand side, you can see a list of activities where it says yes. That is an activity that you're seeking a renewal of. If it says no, that's an activity that either you're not seeking renewal of or it's not an activity on the record. Lower on the screen, it will have your responses to the different yes, no questions. So you can see what your response was. Again, if you need to make changes to any of your responses, click on that edit button that you see in the top right-hand corner of the image on the screen. The next section on the summary page is going to be the renewal documents. It will show you the name of the document, the type of document, and when it was updated. Again, if you need to update your renewal documents, you can go ahead and click on the edit button. Here's an image of your certification section. You need to read and verify it, then check on the box to read the above certification, and then you can click the continue button. Confirmation of the renewal application is submitted. The final screen is going to give you a confirmation message that says your 2026 renewal application has been successfully submitted. Please note that your renewal number, LA-X-XX-6 numbers -REN for annual license records or for temporary records, will pop up if you have the LIC suffix. For businesses that have not received their annual license, you could have an annual license application pending and a status of local compliance underway, or an annual license application with temporary approval, but you haven't received your annual license. Your renewal number will start LA-X-XX, and then it'll have the core number -doc. The -doc, of course, is going to be tied to records that stem from either a TMP record or an ANN record. And then once your renewal has been submitted, the renew license or action required button should no longer be available in Excel. Here's a screenshot of a test record that was submitted. You can see the renewal number assigned is LA-C-26-000046-REN. It's going to give you the message because the records, once you get submitted, are going to be locked until you meet certain requirements. The analyst reviewing the record will verify whether or not those requirements have been met. In addition to submitting the record through the DCR licensing portal, you do have to have your associated invoice paid for your record to be considered submitted. For invoicing purposes, DCR is going to assess the per activity renewal fees once the renewal record is submitted. Renewal records submitted on or after November 2nd, 2025 shall be subject to late fees. Separately, DCR will assess the 2026 annual compliance inspection fees beginning in January of 2026. Payment of the annual compliance inspection fees will be due on or by Monday, March 2nd, 2026. Previously, DCR assessed all of the fees during the normal renewal process. We know businesses have, said that the increased fees plus the state of the market is putting strains on cash flow. So DCR worked with the mayor's office, and the mayor's office gave us authorization to break up these fees. So we'll first do the activity renewal fees, and then for businesses that timely submit before the end of the year, we'll be able to determine whether or not the record is subject to the 2026 annual compliance inspection fees. And if it is, we'll begin assessing those fees in January of 2026. For businesses that allow their record or license to expire and they submit a late renewal in January or February of 2026, the annual compliance inspection fee will automatically be assessed at the time of that submission because you've already missed the regular renewal period and the first late renewal period. For invoicing, there are two paths after the renewal submission. A renewal record is treated as a general application if no is selected on the SEIA question. You'll receive a communication with information on where to locate your renewal invoice in your Excel portal. Again, as part of the first 2 weeks, we will be reviewing records as they get submitted to determine whether or not folks are making the correct selection. And once we verify which bucket an application falls into, communications will be sent out with information. For our social equity applicants, if you select yes for the SEIA, or as part of our initial review of the renewal record, we determine that it is a social equity record and would be eligible for a fee waiver, You'll receive a communication that staff are reviewing your record to confirm your SEIA status and the eligibility to receive a waiver. If waivers are approved for your record, you'll get a notification of which waivers were applied and what fees it covered. An example of an email that will go to a general applicant is on the screen. You can see here that it's got the 2026 renewal application received, then it's going to have the record number. That will be unique for each record renewal submitted. It'll have a generic information about thanking you for submitting your renewal application, and it will tell you how to go into the portal and where to look to locate your 2026 renewal invoice. Here's an example of an email that will be sent to a social equity applicant. Again, it will thank you for submitting your renewal application. It will identify that since you marked yes to the social equity question, DCR staff are going to conduct a review of your record to confirm the status as a social equity business. No invoices will automatically be generated because we don't want people to pay renewal fees if they are eligible for a fee waiver. And, if we determine that somebody is eligible for a fee waiver, we'll make sure those waivers get applied. If you have past due fees from either unpaid fees during the calendar year or unpaid previously deferred fees, you will have to pay those fees. Those are not eligible for waiver, but your renewal fees would be eligible for waiver. If staff apply renewal fees to, or waivers for the renewal fees to your record, you'll be notified of what renewal fees were waived. For fees that are not eligible for waiver, you would receive a separate invoice. Again, in addition to any of the 2026 renewal fees, all businesses are responsible for paying any other outstanding fees that are due on the record. All outstanding fees must be paid before DCR will review your renewal application. Failure to pay outstanding fees may result in the abandonment or denial of applications submitted. Abandonment is when forms and fees are not paid. Denial is if you pay the fees and we determine that you're not eligible for renewal, we would send out a denial. Upon the submission of the renewal application, we'll prepare any updated invoices for outstanding fees so that you have the opportunity to pay anything that's past due. There's different payment options. The first payment option is to pay at a Department of Building and Safety Development Services Center. The general payment option is by check. You must pay the full invoice amount. Partial payments of line items will not be accepted. Receipts must be emailed or dropped off to DCR. You can physically drop off a copy of the receipt at DCR's Dropbox, which is located at our office at 221 North Figueroa Street, Suite 1245, or you can email a copy of the receipt to dcr.payments@lacity.org. All 5 of the Building and Safety Development Services Centers accept check payments. If you want to make a payment to the Department of Building and Safety in cash, you will have to go to their metro location. That is the only location that accepts cash payments. For the Office of Finance, there's multiple payment options. You can pay by cash, check, money order, or credit card. Again, you must pay the full invoice amount. Partial payments will not be accepted. If you would like to pay in person, you have to request an appointment via email. You would email finance.csd.appt@lacity.org. You must schedule and confirm a payment appointment with the Office of Finance no later than Monday, November 3rd of 2025 for your appointment to be considered timely, even if it is scheduled after November 3rd of 2025. Failure to request and confirm a payment appointment on or before Monday, November 3rd, 2025 will result in late fees being assessed against your record. For mail payments, they must be postmarked on or before Monday, November 3rd, 2025 to be considered timely. The reason that November 3rd is the payment date here, the regular renewal cycle ends on Saturday, November 1st. And when the payment deadline falls on a weekend, it's automatically carried over to the next business day, which is Monday, November 3rd of 2025. Hearing deficiencies. Should the renewal application contain any deficiencies in the documents or information provided, DCR will provide one 7-day cure period. The code does not mandate the DCR provide any cure period. So we do need people to adhere to this quick turnaround time. If there are deficiencies in the documents or the information provided, you will only get one 7-day cure period to fix them. If you do not fix it within that cure period, you may be subject to additional fees. An email will be sent by the licensing analyst detailing what corrections need to be made to either the -REN or -DOC record. Applicants must correct all deficiencies within the time frame provided in the email by uploading the corrected documents or information to the appropriate REN or doc record. Failure to do so will result in the abandonment of the renewal application and or assessment of expedited services fees. Final determinations. A successful renewal application for 2026. For LIC records, an email will be sent that includes instructions on how to locate your new annual license certificate for calendar year 2026. For ANN records, an email will be sent that includes languages that the application has been renewed for 2026. For ANN records that have temporary approval, a new temporary approval certificate would be generated. For ANN records that have a status of local compliance underway, it will just acknowledge that the record has been timely renewed, but you still need to, continue processing of your annual license application and either have an annual license issued or ultimately meet the requirements for temporary approval. An unsuccessful renewal application, for both LIC and ANN records, an email will be sent detailing why the renewal was not successful. The email may state that you did not timely submit the required documents within the cure period. It may state that you failed to timely pay the required fees. For folks that do not timely renew, your records will expire after 11:59 p.m. on December 31st of 2025. Businesses that have a status that allows them to operate may not operate beginning January 1st of 2026 or after that until a new license is issued. You have some reminders. So if you're unsure if you have the latest version of a DCR form, please check our website. When the slides are uploaded, it's got a link. We do have a page, and this link will take you there to where all of our forms are. You can always look at the bottom of the form to look at the revision date to see when the form was last revised. If the revision date does not match the revision date on the form on your record, you will have to submit an updated form. Again, all 2025 annual license application and annual license records expire after 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, December 31st of 2025. Annual license application and annual license records will not be renewed automatically. So if you fail to renew, the record will expire and be closed out. We do have a late renewal period that starts January 1st. For folks that do allow for their records to fully expire, if you previously had an operational status of temporary approval, you cannot operate until a new license is issued and you meet the requirements for temporary approval to be reissued. As I discussed earlier, we had one of our new forms, which is to ensure that businesses that have temporary approval or have been issued an annual license make progress towards receiving their DCR operating permit by September 1st of 2026. You need to make sure that you have submitted the required clearance summary worksheet. By September 1st of 2027, you're going to need to demonstrate that you have your necessary building and safety building permit. By September 1st of 2029, you will need to provide a certificate of occupancy that covers the activities that are authorized on your record. And by January 1st of 2031, you have to have received your operating permit, or you will have to cease operations until you meet the requirements to be issued an operating permit. Again, just like the Department of Cannabis Control has done over the years, we are going to try to step people into compliance with this ultimate operating date. And folks that fail to make progress towards getting their operating permit by the January 1st, 2031 deadline will be subject to either denial or non-renewal as part of future renewal cycles. And my last reminder is our regular renewal period runs from September 2nd, 2025 through November 1st of 2025. The asterisk is there because renewal applications must be submitted by November 1st of 2025. But since the last day to pay falls on a Saturday, the period of time to pay is extended to November 3rd of 2025, which is the next business day. You have to submit the record by November 1st and pay by November 3rd to avoid late fees. Our late renewal period will begin on Sunday, November 2nd of 2025, and it will close on December 31st of 2025. Late renewal applications are subject to late fees and must be submitted and paid by December 31st of 2025. If you do not meet that requirement, of course, those records will expire after 11:59 p.m. on December 31st of 2025. And then our second late renewal period will run from January 1st of 2026 through February 28th of 2026. The second late renewal applications must be submitted and paid no later than February 28th of 2026. Renewal records that are not paid by February 28th will be abandoned for non-payment. Renewal records that are submitted during the second late renewal period do not allow the business to operate until a new license is issued and temporary approval status is conferred. So if you do continue to engage in commercial cannabis activity after January 1st of 2026, and you did not renew your ability to operate, you will be treated as an unlicensed business and subject to enforcement action, as well as the, denial of any application that may be timely submitted during the late renewal period because of your failure to follow the rules and regulations in the municipal code. And with that, I want to thank folks for attending. And I think at this point, some folks had submitted questions prior to today's webinar. So if DCR staff could hop on, we can tackle some of those questions.
Good afternoon. Our first question comes from Tiffany W. Does DCR intend to provide extended time to pay fees and extend grants to ensure licensees can renew?
So DCR intends to adhere to the payment timelines in the municipal code. I've kind of outlined them at a couple of places during the webinar, and the slides will be available. Those are going to be strict timelines this year. We did work with the mayor's office to get approval to break up when the annual compliance inspection fee is assessed. So during the renewal periods through December 31st, we're only going to assess the activity renewal fees. And then beginning in January of 2026 for the folks that timely renewed either during the regular or the first late period, we'll begin invoicing for the 2026 annual compliance inspection fee. So folks do get a little bit more time to save up and pay for those fees. And then the compliance inspection fee will have to be paid by February 28th. For folks that submit records during the second late renewal period, in addition to the application fees, any compliance inspection fees will automatically be assessed because you're already in that extended period to pay. All fees have to be paid no later than February 28th, or the record will be abandoned. For the grants have different performance periods. So we don't have the ability to unilaterally get more grant money or extend the grant performance periods. So we have to expend all of the 2024 CEG or cannabis equity grant monies by October 31st of 2025. So those monies can be used on renewal records that, are submitted up through October 31st. Um, we also have our 2025 Cannabis Equity Grant allotment, and we will be using those grant funds as well to provide waivers to social equity applicants. Grant funding is used on a first come, first served basis. So, to the extent that you can get your record in during the regular renewal period early, that gives you the best opportunity to take advantage of both pots of grant monies and be eligible to receive a full waiver for your renewal.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Tiffany W. This year, we will have to renew an annual license and not also a temporary approval at the same time, correct?
Temporary approval is an operational status. So if you have an annual license that has an operational status of temporary approval, then when you renew your annual license record, you are also renewing your operational status of temporary approval. If you have an annual license application and you have a operational status of temporary approval, when you renew your annual license application, it would also renew your operational status of temporary approval.
Our next question from Blake H. Does the social equity individual applicant need to fill out and complete a new successor interest form? Or if one was completed last year, can the same executed copy be used if the successor has not changed?
Great question. So if the successor and interest form is current, it will not have to be resubmitted. Again, we have that new question for yes, no. It'll ask you to review the forms, and if they are current and they don't need to be updated, you can go ahead and verify yes, the form is current, and you will not be required to upload a new version of that form.
A question from Robert B. Can I only submit a modification for free during the renewal period from 9/2 to 11/1, or will I be able to do that as well after? I'm planning on submitting a relocation modification.
So for the modifications that can be submitted for free during the renewal periods, it's baked into whatever renewal period you're submitting it during. So whether it's the regular renewal period or the first late renewal period, that will have no bearing on whether or not it's considered free. But if you do submit it late, you are subject to late fees. However, modifications that require a new record, such as entity substitutions, 100% ownership modifications, or relocation modifications, those are not eligible for free because they require you to submit a brand new record.
A question from Joanne D. How would past violations and fines affect the renewal process? Also, do complaints against a dispensary affect the annual renewal?
I mean, for the first one, notices to correct, notices of violation, fines that are assessed against the business, to the extent that you have cured the deficiencies and you've paid the fines, we will review that information to look to see whether or not you have a history and how often it's occurred. It could result in us making a recommendation to deny your renewal record. If you have not come current or you're delinquent on paying the fines, you will have to be current in order to renew, or you will not be eligible to renew your record. Complaints against the dispensary, to the extent that they were submitted through the complaint portal or received by DCR by another city agency, it could affect your ability to renew, to the extent that a complaint or some other corrective action taken by another city or state or federal agency impacts our ability to recommend renewal. We would have to deny your renewal record, and then you would have the opportunity to appeal that determination.
Our next question from Michelle D. When will invoices be generated?
For at least the first 2 weeks of the renewal period, we're going to be checking the records to make sure that folks are making the right selections as records are getting submitted. And then once staff has had an opportunity to, make sure that the selections to the questions and the documents are being uploaded in the right form or manner are complete, they'll generate an invoice. We are at least initially trying to make sure that folks that would qualify for a social equity fee waiver are making the right selections so that the fee waivers get applied before invoices get generated. If we see during the first couple of weeks that things are going smoothly and folks are, using the system as intended, we may turn on auto generation based on the selections. But at least for the first 2 weeks, we're going to be manually generating those invoices.
Next question from Michelle D. Will owner modifications submitted prior to September 2nd have priority?
Ownership modifications are submitted against the legal business entity record. So those modifications are processed by a group of analysts and have no direct bearing on the actual review of the renewal records. The review of the renewal records will be based on information submitted as part of the forms and then verifying whether or not your legal business entity record status is active.
From Rick J. If we want to remove an owner from the license, may we do it simply by omitting the person from the submitted LIC 4008 form?
In addition to updating the LIC 4008 form, you have to submit the mod document to remove an owner. I think it's mod 4005, and that document's going to have to be uploaded against the legal business entity record for it to be processed. The correlating mod forms that have to be signed by different folks on the record or the owner that's being removed will be reviewed in parallel with any renewal records submitted.
From Rico R. The term on my lease expired earlier this year. My landlord and I have agreed I can remain at the building on tenancy at will, allowing either of us to terminate the lease at any time. Since my lease doesn't extend to the end of 2026, can I renew my license?
The requirement for site control is you have to provide documentation. So if you've gone month to month with your landlord, you're going to have to upload some documentation that reflects that.
Thank you. Question from Luis R. Will there be any social equity fee waivers to add new activities or other modifications?
For the new activities, a portion of our 2025 cannabis equity grant money is going to provide partial fee waivers for the delta between the 2025 fee, which were recently adopted by mayor and council, and the 2020 fee. So, we'll continue to utilize the 2025 grant monies on a first come, first served basis, applying them to both the renewal records and new applications that are coming in. And I think that covers everything.
Thank you, Jason. Next question from Mike S. Will DCR enforce the Los Angeles Municipal Code 104.12 this year?
Definitely aspects of 104.12C will be enforced. As mentioned, businesses need to be current on all DCR related fees. For folks that have not paid previously deferred fees or have other outstanding fees on the records, that's going to have to be addressed before you can renew. Last year, the Department of Water and Power had reached out because some of the businesses got into significant debt and had outstanding fees with them. To the extent that the agency provides the information to us, that could result in the denial of a renewal application if the business does not come into good standing. And the last piece is, the taxation piece, which the mayor and council have been, debating over what to do with that. And there's a couple of motions that are pending before the city council that different non-DCR agencies will be reporting back on. So basically, we will, to the extent possible, follow the municipal code and the lead of our policymakers on those issues.
A question from the initials MS. If DCR discovers that a licensee has outstanding fees, will DCR add the outstanding balance to the renewal invoice, and the full balance will need to be paid in order for DCR to review the renewal application?
If DCR identifies that there are outstanding fees due, a invoice will be generated for the outstanding balance, and the full balance will need to be paid in order for the record to be timely renewed.
Question again from MS. Previously mentioned during this webinar, there was previous mention that policymakers are working to create a delinquency tier system where the biggest delinquencies will be enforced against. Is this information public yet?
DCR has not transmitted its report, but Councilmember Padilla did introduce a motion to study the possibility of creating a tiered system.
Are you done with that, Jason?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to Blake H. If we have an ownership change regarding the non-SEA portion of a Phase 3 retail round 1 license, where ownership is being switched from one entity to another entity, that is, for example, 20% of the licensed entity, would this be allowed to be done during the renewal period? And if you need me to repeat that, let me.
Yeah, for the changes to the 4008 form, which identifies all of the owners, the primary personnel, and financial interest holders, there is a yes/no question as part of the renewal intake process. If you need,
Jason, I'm sorry, part of you cut off.
I will start.
Maybe you can start. Okay.
Sure. And please feel free to interrupt if my audio goes out. To the extent that there are changes to the 4008 form, which is the ownership, primary personnel, and financial interest holder form, you would select no to that question. You're going to say that no, it's not current. That will give you the opportunity to upload a new version of the 4008 form. Depending on what types of changes you're making, you may have to provide additional forms. In one of the earlier questions, the question asked if they were trying to remove an owner. In addition to the updated 4008 form, we have a specific form where the owner being removed acknowledges that they're being removed from the record. So there could be changes in addition to the 4008 and documents that have to be submitted to fully effectuate it. But your assigned analyst would reach out if we need additional documents.
Our next question from Jen M. I understand we need to obtain our operating permit. I'm not clear on how we'd go about doing that.
So the operating permit is an operational status tied to annual license records. So those are the records that end in a -LIC. To obtain your operating permit, you have to have all of the permits and licenses by other governmental agencies as required by the rules and regulations in the municipal code. That includes your um, certificate of occupancy by the Department of Building and Safety covering the activities on your record. That will also include your public health permit issued by the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health. Depending on the activities, you may need fire permits or permits from other governmental agencies for, dealing with hazardous materials or waste. Once you've got all of your permits, you would be able to request a final inspection. The final inspection is a more rigorous version of our normal annual compliance inspections where staff are not only validating the documents and information you submit to make sure that they're valid, they're also going out and doing a site visit and going through and making sure that you're in compliance with the rules and regulations, etc. And if you pass your final inspection, then instead of having temporary approval or a non-operational status, your operational status would be updated to operating permit, and you would get an operating permit in lieu of the temporary approval documents that existing businesses are utilizing. The city also, through the Department of Building and Safety, has a restaurant and small business express permit that helps small business owners navigate the city's permitting process. There's information on our website um, to basically get access to that. So if you have questions about the types of permits your business may need to pursue in addition to your certificate of occupancy and public health permit, that's a great resource that you can utilize.
Let's see. Let me read through this question really quickly. Bear with me for a moment. Okay, this is a clarification request from Tiffany W. And she says, I don't understand the response to the question about removing temporary approval, renewing temporary approval. If a license has received its annual license, why would they also need to renew a temporary approval? Can you please provide some specific examples or do a screen share?
Temporary approval is an operational status. So an annual license by itself does not confer the ability to operate. Unless a business has previously received temporary approval, the default operational status for a new annual license is non-operational. In order to receive temporary approval, you have to have provided evidence that you have a valid state license for the commercial cannabis activity, and you have to pass an initial inspection. And then, of course, folks are going to have to be making progress towards getting the operating permit. The operating permit requires you to provide evidence that you have all of your necessary permits and licenses. So in addition to the state annual license or state license for the activity, you'll have to have your health permit, you'll have to have your certificate of occupancy, et cetera. And then you would have to pass a final inspection, which is more rigorous than the initial inspection to get your operating permit. So, In the past, the city accepted a temporary approval application where a business could just apply for temporary approval outside of the annual licensure process. That application process sunset years ago. Now all records are either an annual license application or an annual license. And then for the annual license records, again, the default operational status is non-operational. Businesses that meet the requirement to get an operational status of temporary approval have to meet that. If you have that operational status, then you will have the ability to renew the record, that operational status. And then if you, of course, meet the requirements to pass the final inspection and get your operating permit, that would be the operational status for your annual license. And, when you would renew your annual license, you would be renewing that operational status.
Thank you, Jason. We've come to the top of the hour, and we are done with questions.
Just want to thank everybody for attending, and DCR staff will do their best to get the webinar and the slide deck uploaded to the website within the next 48 to 72 hours. And again, the renewal period will open next Tuesday, September 2nd. Monday, September 1st is Labor Day this year. So our offices will be closed, and folks will be doing an initial review of the records that start coming in next week prior to issuing invoices to make sure that the system functionality, the forms, and the selections are consistent with the records that are coming in. And, for folks that need to get invoiced or get a waiver, your assigned licensing analyst will be in touch. So thank you, everybody, and have a great weekend.